The second big thing I want to get to today revolves around the interesting storylines that are surrounding Tobacco Road. And obviously, Tobacco Road involves Duke, North Carolina, and NC State. So let's get right now to the Blue Devils, who again are a threat to go far in the NCAA tournament under Jon Scheyer. And the other day against Georgia Tech, Duke made a lineup change. And Jon Scheyer made the decision to insert Caden Boozer, the twin brother of Cameron Boozer, into the Blue Devils starting lineup alongside Caleb Foster in Duke's backcourt and move Isaiah Evans down to the wing. Now, I can tell you, from doing multiple Duke games this season and also being at a Duke practice in the preseason, that the main story and the main questions for Duke entering training camp in September and October were what was going to happen at point guard and what was going to happen on the wing. We've seen throughout the first 2 months of the season Caleb Foster establish himself defensively and also with the knack to make big shots on the offensive end of the floor, as evidenced by the shot he made when Duke won at Michigan State. We have not seen, however, an answer for the Blue Devils on the wing at small forward. Now, Jon Scheyer has tried 3 different players at that spot and give them an opportunity to win that spot. It started with Dame Sarr, it followed up with Nick Kamenya, and it also included Darren Harris, the sharpshooting sophomore. So the move is not a surprising one to me, especially when you consider the conversations that I've had with the Duke coaching staff and how much reverence they have for Caden Boozer's poise. And Caden Boozer played big minutes in that game that Duke played against Texas Tech and lost at Madison Square Garden on December 20th. And he also obviously played big minutes against Georgia Tech. During those 2 games, Caden Boozer is averaging 13 points per game, and he has an assist-to-turnover ratio of 5-1. This is not a guy that's going to wow you with his athleticism. This is a guy who's a ball mover. This is a guy who's a great blend player. But to me, it also encapsulates how important Isaiah Evans is for the long-term potential of this Duke team. For Duke to go back to a Final Four for the second straight year, Duke is going to need a consistent secondary scoring option to take pressure off Cam Boozer, who is clearly separated himself in the National Player of the Year race. Isaiah Evans is that guy. I know he's been up and down, and obviously he has not been a consistent threat yet for Duke. But for Duke to, again, get to a Final Four, Isaiah Evans has to be a formidable piece. Remember last year, when Tyrese Proctor went out of the lineup for Duke in February, Evans played a major role. And over the last 2 seasons, when Isaiah Evans scores 15 or more points, Duke is 11-0. Another thing I want to point out about Duke, the road to Selection Sunday is going to be a lot bumpier this year in the ACC. The league, in my opinion, after only getting 4 teams in the NCAA tournament in 2025, has a chance to double its NCAA tournament representation in 26. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm looking at the ACC right now, and I think you are going to see 7, 8, 9 teams vying for NCAA tournament berths. Duke is not too far off track right now in terms of the resume that the Blue Devils have put together, but we have to remember the ACC is going to be much harder to navigate this year than it was last year. That includes 2 games against Louisville in January for the Blue Devils. And it also will include that massive matchup in Washington, D.C. against Michigan in February. Now, another reason why the ACC is vastly improved from last season is because North Carolina is significantly better. And the main reason why North Carolina is significantly better is because Caleb Wilson, to me, you can make an argument for BYU's A.J. DeBansa, who will be on CBS tomorrow afternoon against Kansas State. But Caleb Wilson, to me, is the player if North Carolina finds a way to march into the top 10 of the polls and continue to climb. Caleb Wilson, to me, is a player that could challenge Cam Boozer in the National Player of the Year race. He is doing things right now that are making him appointment television each time that he steps on the floor. He was unbelievable the other night against Florida State passing the basketball. He's obviously a factor with how accurate he is on offense, with the way he rebounds the ball. And I know he's only been in college basketball 2 months, but I was doing some thinking after the game against Florida State the other night. And I think you can make the case already that Caleb Wilson deserves to be in the conversation among the best front court players that North Carolina's program have had since Tyler Hansborough led the Tar Heels to the national championship in 2009. So you look at some of those players that came through North Carolina up front after Tyler Hansborough. John Henson, Tyler Zeller, Bryce Johnson was unbelievable for North Carolina in 15-16 when the Tar Heels made the national championship game and lost to Villanova on the Chris Jenkins buzzer beater. Obviously, they won a national championship with Kennedy Meeks and Isaiah Hicks in 17. Armando Bacot was a walking double-double. But Wilson, with his ability to affect all these different areas of the box score, with his ability to be ridiculously accurate on offense, he has the ability, and I said this the other day on this show, he has the ability to dominate a game while still being unselfish. Now, with that said, before we look at North Carolina and anointing North Carolina as a bona fide challenger to Duke or even Louisville in the ACC, North Carolina still has some things to work out. The Tar Heels troika of Wilson, Vasar, and Seth Trimble is as good as there is, obviously, in the sport in terms of having your top three options. Surrounding that is going to be the big question. There's been a two-headed monster at point guard for North Carolina with Kyan Evans, the Colorado State transfer, who made 5 threes against Florida State earlier in the week, and also Derek Dixon, who had some big moments in the road win against Kentucky. North Carolina has a sneaky tough game on Saturday at SMU. SMU is a program, okay, that is in year 2 in the ACC under Andy Enfield. But SMU, to me, is in that ACC mix to be an NCAA tournament team among the teams that didn't play, obviously, in the NCAA tournament last year. If you haven't followed the Ponies closely, North Carolina is going to encounter one of the more under-the-radar perimeters that we have in Power Conference basketball on Saturday. Boopy Miller, the lead guard for SMU, is an all-ACC first-team caliber player. Jaron Pierre Jr., the Jacksonville State transfer, is a all-ACC caliber player, putting up major numbers for Andy Enfield. And B.J. Edwards, the third player on the perimeter, is a guy that is the only player in college basketball this year to have multiple triple-doubles. North Carolina, Hubert Davis, the Tar Heels have their hands full coming up Saturday afternoon against SMU in Dallas. Now, there's also another big game for teams in the Triangle on Saturday, and that is NC State and Will Wade taking on Virginia. NC State had a funky kind of non-conference schedule because the Wolfpack didn't really help themselves with any major wins, but they also didn't hurt themselves. It's really smart scheduling by Will Wade. Beat a lot of good mid-major teams who are performing well later in the season: Liberty, Boise State, VCU. But NC State needs a signature win. And Virginia is the type of signature win that could obviously translate to a quad one victory later in the season. Virginia lost that heartbreaking loss to Virginia Tech in triple overtime the other day, but Virginia is massive and has incredible front court depth with Testa Ritter, Johan Grunlow, also Ugana Onyenso and Devin Tillis up front. It's a dangerous game for NC State on the backboard. And NC State, and I know there's been a lot of talk about this, it needs to get Darian Williams back on track. He has been held to single digits in 4 of his last 5 games, but it also needs great decision-making from Quadir Copeland. Quadir Copeland very, very quietly has become a Swiss Army knife player as we look at obviously some of the production for Darian Williams there for NC State. But Quadir Copeland has become a Swiss Army knife player for Will Wade and NC State, playing at a really, really high level, except for not turning the basketball over. He has not been great in terms of his ball security. But over the last 5 games, Copeland averaging 13 points, 8 assists, and 5 rebounds. And another thing I want to point out, I am always an advocate for more standalone games in college basketball because games feel bigger in our great sport if they're not competing with other big games. NC State and Virginia tip off at 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. There's no competition. Nobody else is playing at that time. And I frankly don't understand why more power conferences or even mid-major conferences who need more exposure don't make it a point on Saturday and even Sunday mornings to get into the 11 a.m. Eastern time slot or the 10 a.m. Eastern time slot.